Sometimes history seems way in the past, like a distant memory. Other times it seems to lie present at your feet, like an unexploded concussion grenade. In 1999, Walt Crowley was building an online encyclopedia of Northwest history called Historylink.org. Then, protesters descended on Seattle to disrupt a meeting of the World Trade Organization. Crowley knew the history of protests in the Northwest. He smelled trouble. His widow, Marie McCaffrey, describes what happened.
And he immediately went, you know, there's going to be big trouble here. And nobody really got it that this was going to be a problem. Even though, you know, anarchists were coming in, they're putting up signs, they're being interviewed by the television stations, squatting in buildings. I mean, there were all kinds of clues that maybe things were going to be a little bit out of control.
I think it was recognized that something big was going to go down.
Chris Goodman was Historylink's first computer guy. He built the website.
And we thought we would dabble in into a webcam, which not what you might see today.
People were still on dial-up mostly.
Absolutely. So it wasn't like a video that you would watch or stream. The webcam then was a new image every 30 seconds from a camcorder wired to our web server across the room. We threw everything together like the day before. It was on a tripod that we had leaning out the window and duct taped to the sill so that we could kind of get a little bit better view.
I was looking at the webcam at home, and I was like, I have to go down there.
Our web server didn't crash, but so many people were trying to see these images at the same time. And this isn't a web server in a data room somewhere in a skyscraper. This was actually a box in the corner of our little office that was serving the website out to the world.
And that was the day of the big parade that went down. So I got downtown and, you know, followed this parade and saw, and of course, it was great. I mean, the Teamsters had a giant truck and they were playing Ode to Joy. The Turtles, there was performance art, and everybody was just like, it was really fantastic and weird and otherworldly. And then the idea that these guys could just tape themselves together and prevented the most powerful people in the world from interacting was just an astonishing thing to see. Everybody's opinion was different at the time. I mean, Chris was like, I'm not sure I like this protesting thing. But we'll see what it says now.
It was pretty exciting. Walt Crowley was thrilled too. The excitement couldn't be denied. I mean, it was fun. At one point, holding the camera leaning out the window, there's no audio on our web camera. I think, just yelled spontaneously because it was almost overwhelming with the concussion grenades, the tear gas, and just the energy. So,
what did you yell?
I just yelled. I did. I was like, yeah, or something. Something like that, just spontaneously. I just couldn't help myself. It was almost like a little bit of a sport at the city's expense.
I just remember, you know, calling him and going, you know, can you get out of you can't get out of the building and you should go home. And I'm like, no, I'm not going home, you know. Now I'm over here. Don't go over there. I can see what's over there. Don't go there. I'm like, okay, I won't go there.
It's as close as I want to get to war.
We were expecting people with signs. You know, that'd make a real interesting webcam image. We weren't expecting riots.
Alan Stein is a historian with Historylink.
I was sitting at home and I was working from home doing all this stuff. I thought, man, I want to be there. So the next day was when I came down. And what I remember about that was I parked at the Bond garage. And, you know, and of course, the day before was when the shit hit the fan. So by second day, there was a phalanx of cops all lined up. And I get off, and I'm like, you know, I have to go to our office. And, you know, naturally, I wear black just in general. You know, it's just how I roll. And I'm thinking, oh, great, they're going to think I'm one of the protesters, you know. So fortunately, I had my little Historylink badge that Walt made up for us, the working historian. You know, we had these badges that said working historian. It was like a little press badge. So I walked up to the cops and I just pointed at our window and I said, I work up there and I need to get to my office, you know, and I'm holding my badge up, you know, so they could see it. And they waved me on through. And...
I'm down.
you know, this feeling that you described of wanting to be part of the events, like seeing them live on the webcam and wanting to be part of that's kind of a new feeling for a historian. It's a feeling that historians don't get to have that often.
It's very true. That does very rarely happen. You know, history, most times you're covering it after the fact. And then all of a sudden, we're right in the middle of the maelstrom. We're right there in the center. The eye of the hurricane was right down below our office. So now all of a sudden, we're thrust into being part of this history. But at the same time, we had to kind of remove ourselves, too. You don't want to have a certain bias one way or the other. You know, you can't say, oh, yeah, you know, go out there and, you know, yeah, we're cheering on the protesters. Oh, yeah, oh, the cops, those bastards, you know. We had to just sort of, you know, sit there and just look at it. At the same time, be part of it.
The police would throw a tear gas canister into the crowd, and the crowd would pick it up and throw it back into it, just volleyed back and forth. It's amazing. Somebody had wheeled a dumpster out into the intersection of 4th and Pike, which seemed like a naughty thing to do. People were breaking windows, but this seemed serious. We weren't sure. They were trying to build a barricade out of garbage cans and whatever people could find. And somebody lit it on fire. And as soon as they did that, someone else came out with a fire extinguisher and put it out. And then somebody would light it on fire, and another person would try to put it out again. I think it kept up like that for most of the night.
The phone started ringing off the hook at the office of journalists contacting Walt, you know, to talk to him. And they thought, well, who better to ask about this kind of stuff than an historian?
His voice never recovered after that. He was interviewed from morning till night every day on, you know, internationally.
And he's sitting there on the phone in the office describing what he's seeing out the window in front of him, history as it happens, and then telling Sweden and Norway, whoever these people were, about past protests in Seattle, talking about the freeway protests and Seattle's history of being involved in many protest rallies.
What makes Seattle different? What made Seattle a city that was more susceptible to this sort of thing? And Walt, from the very beginning, talked about our history of protests, our history of labor, general strike, all of these things that is the character that makes up the area. And that given our personality, that this was probably an inevitable thing to happen.
The mayor lost his job, you know. I mean, that's the police chief lost his job. You know, this changed Seattle politics greatly.
Seattle has changed. Many, many, many people have moved here from other places. You know, many people say that the protests comprised partly of people from out of town. Mm-hmm. So how is history still relevant in that case? How can you convince the politicians that they really need to be looking at these historical precedents despite these very different things today?
Well, just because new people come here doesn't mean they don't become acculturated to the type of people that we are here. So you have a DNA of a culture here, because I think, you know, no matter how beautiful your mountains are or your trees, or that you can hike and that you can swim and all of that, in the end, the thing that makes a person want to stay is the people that are there. And the people that are there are the history.
People just came to the site to see the crazy WTO stuff and ended up staying. So we were thrilled.
Again, as Walt said, what is history? It's the stories. It's the stories we tell of who we are.